You don't belong in first class, sweetie. Move before I make you move." Those were the words that ended Officer Silas Graves' career and cost an airline $40 million in a single afternoon. It started as a routine flight from JFK to London. It ended with the entire terminal shut down, a CEO on a warpath, and a viral video that exposed the dark underbelly of racial profiling in high places. When 19-year-old Maya King refused to give up her seat to a wealthy socialite, the police thought they were removing a defiant teenager. They didn't realize they were declaring war on the man who owned the fuel in the plane's wings. This is the story of how one phone call didn't just cancel a flight, it destroyed a legacy. The interior of the Stratosphere Airlines Boeing 777 smelled of sanitized leather and expensive champagne. It was a scent that usually signaled relaxation for the elite travelers boarding Flight 902 from New York's JFK to London Heathrow. But for 19-year-old Maya King, it just smelled like home. Maya adjusted the noise-cancelling headphones over her ears, pulling the hood of her oversized, vintage university sweatshirt further over her forehead. She wasn't trying to hide. She was just trying to exist. At 19, Maya had the distinct features of her father, the sharp jawline, the intense, observant eyes. But she carried herself with a quiet grace that often made people overlook her. She was curled into Seat 1A, the most coveted spot on the plane. It was a suite, really, with sliding doors for privacy and a lie-flat bed. She had her legs tucked under her, a battered sketchbook resting on her knees. To the casual observer, she looked like a college student who had perhaps won a sweepstakes or used her parents' miles. She didn't look like the heir to the Kingston logistics empire. The flight attendants, trained to spot wealth by the cut of a suit or the brand of a watch, initially breezed past her with polite but distant smiles. Maya didn't mind. She preferred the anonymity. She was flying to London to inspect a new art gallery her charitable trust was funding. She wanted to do it low-key. No entourage, no private jet. Just a commercial flight where she could draw in peace. But peace is a luxury that money can't always buy, especially when prejudice walks through the cabin door. The disturbance began at the front galley. "I don't care what the computer says, Charles. I specifically requested 1A. It's the bulkhead. I need the leg room for my circulation." The voice was shrill, piercing through the ambient boarding music. Maya didn't look up immediately, hoping the storm would pass. It didn't. Walking down the aisle was Beatrice Sterling. She was a woman who wore her wealth like armor, draped in a Chanel tweed blazer that cost more than most cars, with a platinum blonde bob that didn't move an inch. Beatrice looked like she was ready to speak to the manager of the entire world. Trailing behind her was her daughter, Tiffany, a girl of about 20 who was glued to her phone, looking bored and embarrassed. Beatrice stopped dead in her tracks when she saw Maya in Seat 1A. The flight attendant, a patient woman named Sarah, tried to guide Beatrice to seat 2F. "Mrs. Sterling, please. 2F is an identical suite. It actually has a better view of the—" "I don't want a view, I want that seat," Beatrice snapped, pointing a manicured finger directly at Maya. Maya felt the air shift. She paused her music, sliding the headphones down to her neck. She looked up, her expression calm. "Excuse me," Maya said, her voice soft but steady. Beatrice looked at Maya with a mixture of confusion and disdain. Her eyes scanned the hoodie, the lack of visible jewelry, the messy bun, and finally, Maya's dark skin. The calculation in Beatrice's eyes was visible. In her world, people who looked like Maya didn't sit in 1A. They cleaned 1A. "You're in my seat," Beatrice announced, clutching her Hermes Birkin bag as if Maya might snatch it. "I think you're mistaken," Maya said, glancing at her digital boarding pass on her phone. I'm assigned 1A. Impossible, Beatrice scoffed. She turned to the flight attendant, Sarah. Check her ticket. Obviously there's been a mix-up. This is a first-class cabin. Maybe she's an employee or an upgrade. Sarah looked uncomfortable. She knew who Maya was, or rather she knew Maya was a VIP because the manifest had flagged her as "Do Not Disturb." But Sarah was also terrified of Beatrice Sterling, whose husband, Richard Sterling, was a notorious hedge fund manager, known for getting service workers fired for sport. "Mum," Sarah said to Maya, her voice trembling slightly. "May I see your boarding pass? Just to clear this up." Maya didn't huff or roll her eyes. She simply held up her phone. The screen clearly displayed, "King Maya, seat 1A, first class." Sarah nodded. "She is in the correct seat, Mrs. Sterling. Please let me take you to 2F. We need to close the doors soon." Beatrice turned a shade of crimson that clashed with her blazer. "I am a Diamond Medallion member. My husband is Richard Sterling. I booked this flight weeks ago. I am not sitting in the second row while some affirmative action scholarship kid takes the prime spot." The cabin went silent. The racial slur wasn't explicit, but the implication hung heavy in the recycled air. Maya's grip on her sketchbook tightened. She had dealt with this before. The assumption that she didn't belong. The assumption that she had taken something from someone more deserving. "Mom," Maya said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "I paid for this ticket. I am staying in this seat. Please move out of the aisle." Beatrice gasped, clutching her pearls in a cliché that would have been funny if the malice wasn't so real. "You listen to me, you little brat. You are going to move, or I will have you removed." "Do you know who I am?" "I don't," Maya said. "And I don't care." That was the spark. Beatrice Sterling didn't just want the seat anymore. She wanted blood. She turned to the flight attendant. "Get the purser. Get the pilot. Get security. I am not flying with this aggressive person threatening me." "Threatening you?" Maya raised an eyebrow. "I haven't moved." "You're being verbally abusive," Beatrice shrieked. "I feel unsafe. Tiffany, are you filming this?" Tiffany, the daughter, didn't look up from her phone. "Mum, stop it. Just sit down." "No," Beatrice yelled. "I want the police. There is a stowaway in first class, refusing to follow crew instructions." Sarah, the flight attendant, looked helpless. She pressed the call button for the cockpit. The situation was spiraling, and the plane hadn't even pushed back from the gate. The captain, a seasoned veteran named Captain Miller, did not come out. Instead, he sent the lead purser, a stern man named David. David had dealt with drunks, unruly rock stars, and nervous flyers, but he wasn't prepared for the toxicity radiating from Beatrice Sterling. "What seems to be the problem?" David asked, stepping between Beatrice and Maya's seat. "The problem," Beatrice spat, "is that this individual is in my seat and refuses to leave. And she has been aggressive. I want her off the flight." David looked at Maya. He saw a young black woman, sitting quietly, hands on her lap. He looked at Beatrice, a wealthy white woman, vibrating with rage. "Miss," David addressed Maya, "is there a problem with the seat assignment?" "No problem on my end," Maya said calmly. "I'm in 1A. She wants me to move." I declined. David checked his tablet. "She is correct, Mrs. Sterling. 1A is assigned to Ms. King." "Then change it," Beatrice screamed. "Move her to coach, or throw her off. She doesn't belong here. Look at her. She probably stole the credit card she used to buy the ticket. Have you checked her ID? Have you actually vetted her?" "Mrs. Sterling, that is a serious accusation," David warned. "It's a valid concern," Beatrice countered. "I am a platinum donor to the NYPD Benevolent Fund. I know criminal behavior when I see it. She is suspicious. She's wearing a hood. She's disrespectful. I demand you call airport security to verify her identity." This was the pivot point. A strong crew would have told Beatrice to sit down or get off. But Stratosphere Airlines had a policy: de-escalate, but prioritize high-value frequent flyers. Beatrice Sterling and her husband spent $500,000 a year with the airline. Maya King's profile showed this was her first flight with them under this account. The algorithm of capitalism began to weigh the options. "Miss King," David said, his tone shifting from neutral to patronizing, "perhaps it would be easier if we reaccommodated you. We have a lovely seat in business class, and we can offer you a voucher for—" Maya cut him off. "No." David blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said no," Maya repeated. "I paid full fare for this seat. I am not moving to business. I am not taking a voucher. And I am certainly not moving to accommodate a woman who just racially profiled me in front of the entire cabin." "It's not about race," Beatrice shouted. "It's about class, and you clearly have none." "David," Maya said, looking the purser in the eye, "if you force me to move, you will regret it. I am asking you to do your job and seat the woman who is causing the disturbance." David's ego was bruised. He didn't like being told what to do by a teenager in a hoodie. He sighed. "If we cannot resolve this civilly, I have to follow protocol for a cabin dispute. That means clearing the cabin or calling port authority." "Call them," Beatrice smirked triumphantly. "Call the police. Let's see how tough she is when the badge shows up." Maya leaned back in her seat and put her headphones back around her neck. "Go ahead. Call them." David went to the interphone. "Captain, we have a level 2 disturbance in First. Requesting port authority to the gate. Passenger refusing crew instructions." He lied. Maya hadn't refused a safety instruction. She had refused a downgrade. But in the aviation world, refusing crew instructions was the magic phrase that turned a passenger into a criminal. 10 minutes later, the blue lights flashed against the terminal windows. 2 officers walked onto the jet bridge. One was a rookie, looking nervous. The other was Officer Silas Graves. Silas Graves was a man who had been on the force too long. He was tired, he was cynical, and he had a quota to fill. He walked onto the plane with the swagger of a man who enjoyed the weight of the gun on his hip. He saw Beatrice Sterling standing in the galley, dabbing fake tears with a silk handkerchief. "Officer, thank God," Beatrice said, grabbing Graves's arm. "She's in there. She's refusing to leave. She threatened me." Graves looked at Beatrice, rich, white, crying. He looked at the seat, 1A. He looked at the occupant, Maya. He didn't need to ask questions. He had already decided the narrative. Officer Graves marched down the short aisle of the first-class cabin. His boots were heavy on the carpet. He stopped at seat 1A, blocking the light. "All right, let's go," Graves barked. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask for her side of the story. Maya looked up. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Graves said, his hand resting casually near his belt. "Captain wants you off. You're trespassing. Grab your bag." "I am not trespassing," Maya said, her voice shaking slightly now. The adrenaline was kicking in. "I have a ticket. This woman is harassing me." "I don't care about your ticket," Graves sneered. "Once the crew says you gotta go, you gotta go. If you don't walk off, I drag you off. And trust me, you don't want to find out how I drag." "Am I under arrest?" Maya asked. "You're about to be," Graves said. "Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, theft of services." "Theft?" Maya stood up. She was tall, nearly 5'10", which seemed to surprise Graves. She looked him in the eye. "I bought this ticket." "With whose money?" Graves asked, a smirk playing on his lips. "Daddy's drug money? Or did you swipe a card?" The cabin gasped. Even Beatrice Sterling looked a little shocked by the crudeness of it, but she stayed silent, enjoying the show. "You have no right to speak to me like that," Maya said. "I have every right." Graves stepped closer, invading her personal space. "I am the law in this airport. Now turn around and put your hands behind your back." "I want to make a phone call," Maya said. "You don't get a phone call." Graves reached for his handcuffs. "I have a right to contact my legal counsel if I am being detained," Maya stated firmly. She had grown up in boardrooms. She knew the language of power, even if Graves couldn't hear it. Graves laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Legal counsel? You got a public defender on speed dial, honey?" "No," Maya said. "I have my father." Graves rolled his eyes. "Oh, here we go. My daddy is going to sue you." "I hear that 5 times a day. Is your daddy a plumber? A mechanic? Does he know his little girl is out here acting like a thug?" Maya didn't answer. She slowly reached into her pocket. "Hand out of the pocket," Graves yelled, reaching for his taser. "I am getting my phone," Maya said, moving with deliberate slowness. She pulled out a sleek, black smartphone. "I am calling my father. If you touch me before I make this call, you will lose your badge, your pension, and your freedom." There was something in her voice, a cold, absolute certainty that made Graves hesitate, just for a second. Maya unlocked the phone. She didn't scroll through contacts. She pressed a single widget on the home screen. It was a direct line. It rang once. "Maya?" The voice on the speakerphone was deep, baritone, and sounded like tectonic plates shifting. "Dad," Maya said, her voice cracking for the first time. "I'm at JFK, Flight 902, Stratosphere Airlines." "I know," the voice said. "I'm tracking the flight. Why aren't you in the air?" "There is a police officer named Silas Graves here," Maya said, looking directly at the officer, "and a passenger named Beatrice Sterling. They are removing me from the flight. The officer accused me of stealing the ticket. He called me a thug. He is threatening to drag me off." There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was a terrifying silence. It lasted for 5 seconds, but it felt like an hour. "Put him on," the voice said. Graves scoffed. "I ain't talking to your daddy. Put him on." The voice roared from the tiny speaker, so loud that the passengers in row 3 heard it. Maya held the phone out. Graves, feeling foolish but compelled by the sheer volume of the command, leaned in. "Yeah?" "Who is this?" Graves asked aggressively. "You better tell your daughter to comply, or she's spending the night in central booking." "Officer Graves." The voice was deadly calm now. "My name is Julian King. I am the CEO of Kingston Logistics. We currently supply 70% of the aviation fuel used at JFK Airport. We also handle the ground baggage contracts for Stratosphere Airlines." Graves blinked. The name Kingston was plastered on every truck on the tarmac. It was on the side of the hangars. It was everywhere. "So what?" Graves blustered, though his confidence was cracking. "You think you can bribe me?" "No, Officer Graves," Julian King said. "I don't bribe. I dismantle. Listen to me very carefully. If you touch my daughter, if you so much as graze her sleeve, I will not just sue the department. I will issue an immediate stop work order for every Kingston fuel truck at JFK. I will ground every single plane in that airport. I will paralyze the Eastern Seaboard's air travel within 10 minutes. Graves laughed nervously. "You can't do that." "Try me," Julian whispered. "Look out the window." Graves looked. The other passengers looked. Beatrice Sterling looked. Outside on the tarmac, the massive fuel truck connected to the wing of the Boeing 777 suddenly stopped pumping. The driver, wearing a bright yellow vest with Kingston on the back, was holding a radio. He looked up at the cockpit made a cutthroat gesture, and began to detach the hose. In the distance, 3 other fuel trucks pulled away from other planes. "That was the fuel," Julian King's voice came from the phone. "Next, I pull the baggage handlers, then the de-icing crews. By the time you get the handcuffs off your belt, Officer Graves, I will have cost this airport $10 million. Do you want to be the man responsible for that? Or do you want to apologize to my daughter and get off my plane?" The silence in the cabin was absolute. Beatrice Sterling had gone pale, her mouth hanging open. The purser, David, looked like he was about to faint. Graves looked at the phone, then at the window, then at Maya. The teenager in the hoodie wasn't just a passenger. She was the most powerful person in the airport. The silence on Flight 902 was broken only by the hum of the auxiliary power unit, a sound that suddenly seemed fragile against the weight of Julian King's threat. Officer Silas Graves was still holding the phone, but his grip had slackened. The arrogance that had defined his posture moments ago was leaking out of him, replaced by a dawning, cold dread. He looked out the window again. It wasn't just the fuel truck. Down on the tarmac, the ecosystem of the airport was dying. The baggage trains, usually weaving frantically between planes like worker ants, had stopped. The drivers were stepping off their vehicles, folding their arms and looking at their watches. The pushback tugs, responsible for moving the massive jets away from the gates, were idling, their operators climbing out of the cabs. It was a synchronized strike, executed with military precision. Inside the cockpit, chaos erupted. Captain Miller, a man who prided himself on on-time departures, burst out of the flight deck door, his cap slightly askew. He ignored the passengers and went straight to the purser, David. "David, what is happening?" Miller hissed, his voice tight with panic. "Ground control just told me Kingston Logistics has issued a safety stand down for the entire terminal. We just lost our fuel, our baggage, and our pushback. We are dead in the water. Who is that passenger?" David, pale and sweating, pointed a trembling finger at Maya in seat 1A. That's Maya King, Captain. Her father is on the phone with the officer." Captain Miller looked at Maya, then at the officer, then at Beatrice Sterling. He put the pieces together instantly. He turned on Beatrice with a ferocity that made her flinch. "You!" The captain pointed at the socialite. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," Beatrice shrieked, though her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "I demanded a seat change. This officer is handling a disturbance. That man on the phone is bluffing. He can't shut down JFK. It's terrorism." "It's not terrorism, Mrs. Sterling," Maya said from her seat. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. "It's leverage. My father owns the contracts. A safety stand down is perfectly legal if he suspects a hostile environment for his employees or his family. And right now, I am in a hostile environment." Officer Graves finally found his voice. He snatched the phone back to his ear. "Look, Mr. King, let's be reasonable. We can work this out. I'm just doing my job." "Your job," Julian King's voice cut through the speaker, "was to protect citizens. Instead, you became a mercenary for a bored housewife. You wanted to drag my daughter? Fine. Drag her. But know this, I am 10 minutes away. If she is not sitting in that seat, unharmed and unbothered when I walk through that door, I will sue you personally for everything you will ever earn. I will take your pension. I will take your house. I will ensure you never work security at a mall, let alone an airport." "You're threatening a police officer," Graves stammered, sweating profusely now. "I am promising you consequences," Julian corrected. "Now put the captain on." Graves handed the phone to Captain Miller like it was a live grenade. "This is Captain Miller," the pilot said, trying to sound authoritative but failing. "Captain," Julian said, "your airline, Stratosphere, operates on a credit line for fuel provided by my company. As of this moment, that credit line is suspended. Your COO, Marcus Thorne, is calling me right now on my other line. I'm letting it ring. Do you know why? Why? Miller whispered. Because I want him to sweat. I want him to ask why his flagship flight to London is being held hostage by a racist woman and an incompetent cop. You have a choice, Captain. You can back the officer and Mrs. Sterling, in which case this plane sits here until it rusts, or you can fix this. Captain Miller didn't hesitate. He was a pilot. He cared about the schedule, the plane, and his job. Beatrice Sterling's diamond medallion status meant nothing compared to the wrath of the man who fueled the fleet. Miller handed the phone back to Meyer. He straightened his uniform and turned to Graves. Officer Graves, Captain Miller said firmly. I am the commander of this aircraft. Under federal aviation regulations, I have the final say on who flies. I am determining that Ms. King is not a security threat. She refused instructions, Beatrice shouted. Quiet, Miller snapped at her. He turned back to Graves. She stays. However, I am now designating you, Officer Graves, as a disruption to the operation of this flight. I am asking you to deplane immediately. Graves's jaw dropped. You're kicking me off. I'm the police. You are delaying my flight and inciting a riot, Miller said. Get off my plane. Now. Graves looked around. The passengers in first class, who had initially been annoyed by Meyer, were now staring at him with open hostility. They wanted to go to London. They didn't care about Beatrice's seat anymore. They realized that Meyer was the only thing keeping the plane connected to the airport's life support. You got to be kidding me, Graves muttered. He holstered his taser aggressively. Fine, I'm leaving. But I'm writing this up. This isn't over. Oh, it's definitely not over, Meyer said softly, as Graves stomped past her. Graves exited the jet bridge, fuming. But the crisis wasn't solved. The fuel trucks hadn't moved back. Beatrice Sterling stood alone in the aisle. Her ally was gone. Her power was broken. She looked at Meyer, expecting the girl to gloat. Meyer simply looked at her watch. You have about 5 minutes before he gets here. Who? Beatrice asked, her voice trembling. My father, Meyer said. And if you think the phone call was bad, you really aren't ready for the face-to-face. At that moment, the entire plane shuddered. Not from an engine starting, but from the sound of sirens. Not police sirens, but the deep air horn blasts of heavy convoy vehicles breaching the tarmac perimeter. Passengers rushed to the windows on the left side of the plane. Oh my God, someone whispered. Is that the president? It wasn't the president. It was 3 matte black SUVs with the gold Kingston crest on the doors, tearing across the tarmac, flanked by airport operations vehicles that were escorting them, not stopping them. They bypassed the terminal completely and drove directly to the wheels of Flight 902. The lead SUV screeched to a halt at the bottom of the jet bridge stairs. The door flew open. Julian King stepped out. He was a giant of a man, 6'4", wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than the officer's annual salary. He didn't look angry. He looked like an approaching natural disaster. He bypassed the terminal security doors, which had been buzzed open for him by a terrified airport manager, and stormed up the metal stairs of the jet bridge. The heavy thud of his footsteps vibrated through the floor of the plane. Beatrice Sterling shrank back into the galley, trying to make herself invisible. Tiffany, her daughter, had put her phone down and was now staring at Meyer with wide, fearful eyes. He's here, Meyer whispered. The entry of Julian King onto Flight 902 sucked the oxygen out of the cabin. He didn't run. He walked with a terrifying, deliberate slowness. When he ducked his head to enter the first-class cabin door, the flight attendants instinctively stepped back, pressing themselves against the galley walls. Julian ignored everyone. He didn't look at the captain. He didn't look at the other passengers. His eyes locked instantly onto Maya. He walked to seat 1A. He crouched down, his face softening instantly. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low and gentle. "No," Maya said, taking off her headphones. "Just tired, Dad, and embarrassed." "You have nothing to be embarrassed about," Julian said, standing up to his full height. He turned around. The softness vanished. His face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "Who?" Julian asked. He didn't shout. He just asked the room. Maya pointed a finger toward the galley, where Beatrice Sterling was trying to hide behind the beverage cart. Julian took 2 steps and stood before Beatrice. The woman, who had been a terror to the service staff just 30 minutes ago, looked like a child caught stealing candy. She clutched her Birkin bag to her chest, her knuckles white. "Mrs. Sterling, I presume?" Julian said. I... Beatrice stammered. "There was a misunderstanding. I thought... The seat map." "Save it," Julian cut her off. "I know who you are. Beatrice Sterling, wife of Richard Sterling. Sterling Capital Management. You live on Park Avenue. You sit on the board of the City Arts Council." Beatrice nodded frantically, a glimmer of hope returning. Yes, exactly. We run in the same circles, Mr. King. Surely you understand. It was stressful boarding. I just wanted my proper seat." Julian leaned in close. "We do not run in the same circles, Beatrice. I build the world. You and your husband leech off it. And speaking of your husband..." Julian pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and held it up so Beatrice could see. It was a live stock ticker. "Do you recognize this ticker symbol? STRL?" Julian asked. That's Richard's fund," Beatrice whispered. 5 minutes ago," Julian said, his voice ice-cold, "I ordered the withdrawal of the Kingston Pension Fund from your husband's management. That represents about 40% of his liquidity. I also made a few calls to my friends at the other major logistics firms. They are pulling out, too." Beatrice's eyes went wide. You can't do that. You'll bankrupt him." "I already have," Julian said. "The market reacts fast, Beatrice. News travels. Kingston Logistics pulls billions from Sterling Capital due to unethical management. That's the headline going out on Bloomberg in about..." He checked his watch. 30 seconds. "Please," Beatrice grabbed his sleeve. "Please don't do this. Richard had nothing to do with this. It was just a seat." Julian brushed her hand off his suit like it was dirt. "It wasn't just a seat. You tried to weaponize the police against my daughter because you didn't think she looked like she belonged. You tried to humiliate her. You tried to give her a criminal record. Did you think about the consequences then?" "I'm sorry," Beatrice wailed. "I'm sorry. Maya, please." She turned to Maya, begging. "Tell him to stop. I'm sorry." Maya looked at the woman. She remembered the slur. She remembered the smirk when the officer threatened to drag her. "I accept your apology," Maya said calmly. "But actions have consequences, Mrs. Sterling. You taught me that when you called the police." Julian turned to the purser. "David, get her off this plane," Julian commanded. David blinked. "Sir?" "You heard me," Julian said. "She caused a security threat. She harassed a passenger. She delayed a flight. If she is on this plane, my fuel trucks stay parked. If she gets off, maybe, I turn the pumps back on." David looked at Beatrice. The choice was obvious. "Mrs. Sterling," David said, his voice finding a new strength, "I need you to collect your belongings and disembark immediately." "No!" Beatrice screamed. "I have tickets. I have rights." "Captain!" David called out. Captain Miller stepped forward. "Mrs. Sterling, you are being denied carriage. Leave now, or I will have the Port Authority remove you. And ironically, the officer you called is waiting right outside the door." Beatrice looked around the cabin. Every single pair of eyes was staring at her with disgust. Her daughter, Tiffany, had already stood up. "Mum, let's go," Tiffany hissed, her face burning with shame. "You've done enough." "Tiffany," Beatrice gasped. "Move, Mum." Tiffany grabbed her mother's arm and practically dragged her toward the door. Beatrice was sobbing, her composure shattered, her legacy in ruins. As she stumbled onto the jet bridge, she passed Officer Graves, who was standing there writing his report. He didn't even look at her. He was too busy staring at the 3 black SUVs, realizing he had bet on the losing horse. Inside the cabin, the air felt lighter. Julian turned to Captain Miller. "Captain, I apologize for the disruption to your schedule." I understand, Mr. King," Miller said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Will the fuel be returning?" Julian looked at Maya. "That depends on my daughter. Maya, do you still want to go to London?" Maya looked at her seat. Then she looked at the passengers. She saw a young mother in row 3, holding a crying baby. She saw an elderly couple holding hands, looking worried. "People need to get where they're going, Dad," Maya said. "Let them fly." "And you?" Julian asked. Maya shook her head. "I think the vibe is ruined for me. I'll take the G650 tomorrow." Julian smiled. "Good choice." He pulled out his radio. "Base, this is King. Restore operations immediately. Fuel the bird. Load the bags. We are clearing out. Copy that, Mr. King." The radio crackled. Outside, the drivers hopped back into their trucks. The engines roared to life. The ecosystem of the airport restarted as if a pause button had been released. Julian extended his hand to his daughter. "Let's go home, kiddo." Maya grabbed her bag and her sketchbook. As she walked down the aisle, a strange thing happened. The man in 2F, the seat Beatrice had refused, started to clap. Then the woman across from him joined in. Within seconds, the entire first-class cabin and the rows behind them in business were applauding. They weren't clapping for a billionaire. They were clapping for justice. They were clapping because, for once, the bully didn't win. Maya gave a small, shy wave and walked off the plane with her father. As they descended the stairs to the tarmac, the cool wind hit Maya's face. She looked up at her dad. "Did you really bankrupt her husband?" she asked. Julian opened the door of the SUV for her. "Let's just say Richard is going to have a very long meeting with the SEC on Monday. And you know Officer Graves?" "Yeah." "I already sent the body cam footage requests to the police commissioner," Julian said, climbing into the car. "Graves has a history of this. We're just the first ones with the resources to expose it. By tonight, his badge will be a souvenir." The convoy pulled away, leaving the commercial jet to finally push back from the gate. The drive from JFK to the Kingston estate in the Hamptons was quiet, but the digital world was screaming. Maya had expected the incident to disappear into the annals of airport gossip. She assumed a few people would tell their friends. Beatrice would drink a martini and forget about it, and life would move on. She was wrong. She hadn't realized that while Beatrice was screaming and Officer Graves was posturing, Tiffany Sterling, Beatrice's own daughter, had been recording. Tiffany hadn't recorded it to support her mother. She had recorded it because she was tired. Tired of the entitlement, tired of the embarrassment, and tired of her mother treating service workers like furniture. Tiffany had uploaded the clip to TikTok before the plane doors even closed, with the caption, "My mum trying to kick a girl out of first class. Turns out the girl owns the airport." Karma. Karen, Dame JFK. By the time Maya sat down for dinner at her father's table that evening, the video had 14 million views. Julian King placed his tablet on the table. "Have you seen this?" Maya looked at the screen. The video showed Beatrice's face contorted in rage, screaming, "I don't care who she is." It showed Officer Graves looking smug, hand on his belt, saying, "Does your daddy know his little girl is acting like a thug?" And then, the glorious turnaround. The video captured Julian's voice over the speakerphone, booming through the cabin. It caught the moment the fuel truck disconnected. It caught the color draining from Graves's face. The internet was having a field day. On Twitter, X, the hashtag #OrangeFuelDaddy was trending #1 worldwide, referring to Julian's power move. Seat 1A was trending at Subla 2. "The commentary is aggressive," Maya noted, scrolling through the replies. User AilFlyHigh22 wrote, "The way the cop realized he just ended his own career is cinema. Pure cinema." User OR Justice Watch wrote, "Notice how quickly the narrative changed when they realized she had money? If she was just a regular student, she would be in a cell right now. This exposes everything." But the viral fame wasn't just memes and jokes. It was a weapon. The fallout began the next morning. Stratosphere Airlines, desperate to get ahead of the PR nightmare, released a statement at 8 a.m. Stratosphere Airlines has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. We have permanently banned passenger Beatrice Sterling from all future flights. Furthermore, we are reviewing our protocols regarding law enforcement involvement in non-violent cabin disputes. It was a start, but the mob wanted more. They wanted the money. By 9:30 a.m., the stock market opened. Richard Sterling's hedge fund, Sterling Capital, was in freefall. It wasn't just because Julian King had pulled his money. It was because the internet had identified Richard as Beatrice's husband. Investors, fearing the toxicity of the brand, were dumping stock. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. At 11:12 a.m., a paparazzi photo surfaced of Beatrice Sterling leaving her Park Avenue apartment. She was wearing sunglasses and a scarf, trying to hide. A reporter shouted, "Mrs. Sterling, do you regret calling the police on a teenager?" Beatrice shoved the camera away and ran into a waiting car. That clip only added fuel to the fire. But the worst fate was reserved for Officer Silas Graves. The video clearly showed him abusing his power. He hadn't just removed a passenger. He had insulted her, profiled her, and threatened physical violence without cause. The NYPD was flooded with calls. The mayor's office issued a statement saying they were deeply concerned by the footage. Maya watched all of this from the safety of her living room. It felt surreal. "They are destroying them," Maya said softly. "They are holding them accountable," Julian corrected. He was on his laptop, reading legal briefs. "There is a difference, Maya. Beatrice Sterling has lived her whole life thinking her comfort matters more than your dignity. Graves has likely done this to dozens of other kids who didn't have a CEO father to bail them out. Today the bill came due." "What happens now?" Maya asked. "Now," Julian closed his laptop. "We finish it. The police commissioner just called. There is a disciplinary hearing for Graves tomorrow. They want you to give a statement." Maya froze. "I have to see him again." "You don't have to do anything," Julian said. "I can have our lawyers handle it, but I think he needs to see you. Not as a victim, but as the person who ended him." Maya thought about the fear she felt when Graves reached for his handcuffs. She thought about the thug comment. "I'll go," Maya said. The internal disciplinary hearing at one police plaza took place 3 days later in a room that smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. It was a windowless chamber designed to make officers feel protected, a place where complaints usually went to die. But today, The room felt like an execution chamber. Officer Silas Graves sat at the small metal table in the center of the room. He was not wearing his uniform. He was dressed in a grey suit that was tight around the shoulders, his face a mask of sullen resentment. Beside him sat his union representative, a man named Henderson, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Across from them sat the tribunal board, 3 high-ranking officers with stone faces, and to the side, observing, were Maya and Julian King. They were flanked by Arthur Penhaligon, the most expensive civil rights attorney in New York City. The proceedings began with the video. It was projected onto the white wall behind the tribunal. The quality was crisp. Tiffany Sterling's phone had done its job well. The room watched in silence as the digital version of Graves sneered, "Does your daddy know his little girl is out here acting like a thug?" In the silence of the hearing room, the word thug hung in the air like a poisonous gas. Commissioner Davis, the head of the tribunal, pressed a button to pause the video on Graves's face. He looked down at the officer. "Officer Graves," Davis said, his voice dangerously quiet. "In your initial report, filed immediately after you were removed from the aircraft, you stated that the suspect, Ms. King, was belligerent, flailing her arms, and presented a physical threat to the flight crew. Do you stand by that statement?" Graves shifted in his seat. He cleared his throat. "Sir, in the heat of the moment, with the complainant Mrs. Sterling screaming, things were chaotic. I perceived a threat." "You perceived a threat?" Davis asked, pointing at the frozen screen where Maya was sitting calmly with her hands in her lap. "I see a 19-year-old girl sitting in a lie-flat seat wearing a hoodie. Where is the flailing? Where is the belligerence?" "She refused a direct order to vacate," Graves muttered, his eyes fixed on the table. "An unlawful order," Arthur Penhaligon interjected smoothly, "based on a fraudulent complaint from a passenger who has since been banned from the airline." Davis turned his gaze to Maya. "Ms. King, do you wish to make a statement?" Maya stood up. She felt her father's hand squeeze her shoulder briefly before letting go. She walked to the podium. She didn't look at the tribunal. She looked directly at Silas Graves. "Officer Graves," Maya began, her voice steady, echoing slightly in the small room. "My father taught me that respect is earned, but you taught me that for some people, respect is conditional. You walked onto that plane, and you didn't see a passenger. You didn't see a customer. You saw a color. You saw a stereotype." Graves clenched his jaw but didn't look up. "You asked if my father knew I was acting like a thug," Maya continued, stepping closer. "Well, he knows now. But the real question is, does your family know? Do your children know that their father is a man who bullies teenagers to impress socialites? You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted to drag me off that plane to make a point. The only point you made is that you are unworthy of the badge you carry." "Objection," Henderson, the union rep, said half-heartedly. "Badgering the officer?" "Overruled," Commissioner Davis snapped. "She's right." The tribunal didn't need to deliberate for long. The political pressure was immense, but the evidence was overwhelming. The video had been viewed 30 million times. The NYPD could not afford to keep Silas Graves. "Officer Silas Graves," Davis read from the ledger, "it is the finding of this board that you are guilty of conduct unbecoming, filing a false official statement, and violation of civil rights. Effective immediately, your employment with the New York Police Department is terminated. You are stripped of your rank and your pension." The word pension hit Graves harder than a bullet. His head snapped up. "My pension? You can't take 20 years. I have a mortgage." "You should have thought about that before you tried to illegally detain a citizen," Davis said coldly. Leave your badge and gun on the table. Escort him out." Graves stood up, his hands shaking. He unclipped the shield from his belt, the piece of metal that had given him power for 2 decades, and dropped it onto the table. It made a hollow clatter. He looked at Julian King, expecting to see a gloating smile. But Julian wasn't smiling. He looked bored. Graves was no longer an adversary. He was just a discarded wrapper. As Graves walked out of the room, a civilian for the first time in 20 years, he realized his life as he knew it was over. But for Beatrice Sterling, the nightmare was just beginning. 3 miles away, in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, the air was frigid. Beatrice Sterling sat on her velvet chaise lounge, a glass of scotch in her hand. It was 11:15 a.m. Her phone, usually buzzing with texts from the Junior League and the Charity Gala Committee, was dead silent. She had been blocked, unfollowed, erased. The door to the study opened, and Richard Sterling walked in. He was packing a briefcase. He didn't look at her. "Richard," Beatrice said, her voice brittle. "Are you going to the office? I thought maybe we could issue a joint statement. Say it was a medical episode, a reaction to medication." Richard stopped. He turned to look at his wife of 25 years. His eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep and too many meetings with crisis management teams. "There is no we, Beatrice," Richard said. "Not anymore." "What do you mean?" Beatrice stood up, the ice clinking in her glass. "I just came from a meeting with the partners," Richard said, his voice flat. Kingston Logistics pulled their capital. Then the McKinnon Trust followed. Then the Sovereign Wealth Fund. By noon today, Sterling Capital had lost 40% of its assets under management. "Do you know how much money that is?" "We can fix it," Beatrice pleaded. "We have friends." "We don't have friends," Richard laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "We have associates, and associates don't like toxicity. You are toxic, Beatrice. You are radioactive. I have been fielding calls from the SEC all morning because they think my fund is unstable." He walked to the hall table and dropped a thick manila envelope onto the marble surface. "What is that?" Beatrice whispered. "Divorce papers," Richard said. "My lawyers advised me that the only way to save the firm, and what's left of my reputation, is to distance myself from the source of the controversy. That's you. You're leaving me." Beatrice gasped, tears finally spilling over. "Over a plane seat?" "Over your arrogance," Richard corrected. "You thought you were untouchable. You forgot that there is always a bigger fish. Julian King is a shark, Beatrice, and you decided to poke him in the eye. I'm not going to let you drag me down to the bottom with you." Richard picked up his briefcase. "The prenup is ironclad. You get the apartment and a stipend. But the Hamptons house, the Aspen Lodge, and the social standing? That's gone. Goodbye, Beatrice." The door clicked shut. Beatrice stood alone in the silence of the massive apartment. She walked to the window and looked out at the city she used to think she owned. Now, she was just another face in the window, trapped in a gilded cage of her own making. 6 months later, the atmosphere in Hangar 4 at JFK Airport was electric. The massive space, usually reserved for repairing 747 engines, had been transformed. A stage was set up in front of a gleaming, brand-new Gulfstream GR100. The banner overhead read, "The King Foundation, Ascend Scholarship Program." Hundreds of people were in attendance. There were press cameras, aviation executives, and community leaders. But the most important guests were the 50 young men and women sitting in the front 2 rows. They were black, Hispanic, Asian, and white, kids from the outer boroughs, from neighborhoods where becoming a pilot felt as impossible as walking on Mars. Maya King stood backstage, adjusting the microphone pack on her blazer. She looked different than the girl in the hoodie. She wore a tailored suit, her hair pulled back in a sleek, professional bun, but her eyes still held that same intensity. "You ready?" Julian asked, walking up beside her. "I think so," Maya said. "I'm still nervous." "Don't be," Julian smiled. "You conquered the NYPD and Wall Street in the same week. A speech is nothing." "It's not the speech," Maya admitted. "It's the responsibility. All these kids, they're looking at me like I'm a hero. I just wanted a nap." Julian laughed, a deep rumble. "Heroes rarely ask for the job, Maya. They just refuse to move when everyone else tells them to. Go out there." Maya walked onto the stage. The applause was deafening. It washed over her, warm and genuine. She waited for it to die down, looking out at the faces of the students. "Thank you," she said. 6 months ago, I was sitting on a plane a few hundred yards from where we are standing right now. I was told by a very loud woman and a very angry man that I didn't look like I belonged in first class." A ripple of knowing laughter went through the crowd. "They looked at my hoodie and my skin, and they decided my story for me," Maya continued. "They decided I was a trespasser, a criminal, a thug. They tried to use their power to erase me." She paused, gripping the podium. "But here is the thing about power," she said, her voice rising. "It doesn't belong to the people who shout the loudest. It belongs to the people who know who they are. My father helped me that day, yes. He made a call that shook this airport. But not everyone has a dad who can shut down a terminal." She looked directly at the 50 students in the front row. "That is why we are here today. Because you shouldn't need a billionaire father to be treated with dignity. You shouldn't need a viral video to get justice. This foundation was built with the settlement money from the people who tried to tear me down. Every dollar that Beatrice Sterling and the City of New York paid in damages is now going into your flight hours." The students cheered, some of them standing up. "We are launching the Ascend program today," Maya announced. "Full tuition, full flight training, mentorship, jobs waiting for you at Kingston Logistics when you graduate. We are going to flood the skies with pilots who look like us, so that the next time a 19-year-old girl sits in seat 1A, nobody asks to see her ticket. They just ask if she wants champagne." The crowd erupted. It wasn't just applause, it was a roar of validation. Maya looked down at her father in the front row. Julian was beaming, looking more proud than he ever had, closing a billion-dollar deal. Maya looked up at the ceiling of the hangar, through the skylights where a plane was taking off, soaring into the blue. The trauma of that day had left a scar. Yes, but scars were just tough skin. She wasn't the girl in the hoodie anymore. She was Maya King, and she had cleared the runway for everyone coming behind her. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you handle a bully. Maya didn't just win, she changed the game. It's a powerful reminder that prejudice isn't just morally wrong, it's a bad business decision. Beatrice Sterling lost her marriage and her status. Officer Graves lost his career. And Maya? She turned a moment of humiliation into a legacy of power. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying justice and instant karma, please destroy that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. And let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Maya's seat? Would you have moved, or would you have made the call? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.